Hey guys, so welcome to the third part of the demand series for Eco with a Twist. Now, one of the most annoying and irritating things about economics is the fact that for almost any theory, we always take assumptions. And I remember clearly that my hatred for assumptions started in class 12 when we were learning about we were basically getting more and more further in the idea of demand. And we'd learned some of the market forms. So, perfect competition, monopolistic competition, all of that. And there are so many assumptions which we took for the demand under monopolistic competition that I was like, okay, then what's the difference between demand and for perfect competition? Because the amount of assumptions I've taken has literally made it a hypothetical or a very imaginary scenario. And any theory which I've learnt after that has always had its fair share of assumptions. And truth be told, now that I've learned a subject which is econometrics or mathematical economics, that's something which we'll go through later on. I've understood the importance of assumptions, but I still hate it. And I'll explain why. Now, the reason for assumptions is that it makes life much more simpler. So, for instance, when a very basic assumption which is there in nearly all economic theories is that the person who we are considering, so in demand it's the consumer, in supply it's the producer. This person is said to be rational. So he or she takes all his decisions based on how the market fluctuates, how important is a commodity to him, all of that. Now, that's a fair assumption. There's no problem with it. But the more and more you go for, like, there's one assumption which I see is that technology is assumed to be constant. Obviously not. Technology in today's world is so dynamic. Literally every day it's changing. The funny thing is, there are two examples which I'll quote here. So one, the show Phineas and Ferb. Nearly at the end of every episode, whatever technology Phineas and Ferb invent is destroyed. And that's literally what's happening in real life. Like, it's not getting destroyed, but it's getting upgraded. Every single day, every month, based on the type of sector you're dealing with, your technology is changing. And you can't assume that technology is said to be constant. It's a very wrong assumption to take. And a classic example is the chips industry. I love Kurkure, so I kept talking about Kurkure in my first episode. So here we go. A company, Too Young, which was advertised by Virat Kohli. Now, Too Young is said to be a multigrain chip, new technology. Maybe not a physical machine, but it's a new way of in eating a chip. It's a more healthier way of a chip, right? Now, immediately after that, nearly all companies, Pringles, Lay's, Frito-Lay, everyone, they've come up with their version of a healthier chip. May not be multigrain, but it's something which is healthier. So they have also tapped into the health snack, right? And that's a technology upgradation. So the moment I say technology is constant, I'm making so many things redundant. Now, we'll get into the whole maths of it later on. That's another topic. But if you remember in the first lesson when I had introduced the 101 demand curve, the interesting thing about such a demand curve is that it reduces a lot of assumptions. And that's one thing which I'll go through in this lecture. So here we go. This is going to be the lecture plan for today. I've tried writing it a little more clearer. I got some input that sometimes the stuff which I'm writing isn't super clear. So first and foremost, in the sorry. So in the last few minutes of the previous video, I introduced the idea of a progressive demand curve. So that's one thing which we look into. But the progressive demand curve, we're going to look at it from two forms. Number one, where the demand curve is based on two different stakeholders, and number two, where it's categorizing demand for different income groups. So those are some of the assumptions which we are removing slowly. Then we're going to dive into the idea and the definition of demand. So when we discussed in the first lecture what is demand, there were two words which I clearly highlighted: willingness and ability. And we're going to see these two words in the graph itself. Number three, market demand curve. how the idea and dynamic of that works. And the fourth point for it is the law of diminishing marginal utility and the supply constraint. Yeah, then we just go into explanation of the progressive curves. What are the assumptions which, as much as I hated the 101 demand curve, also has some assumptions, but it's not too big. We'll explain it later on. And yeah, finally, producer mobility, then inventory minimization, all of that. So that's just the gist of how the lecture is going to be. I have my notes. So the first thing, let's understand. So when I had introduced the 101 demand curve, where the demand curve is upward sloping with quantity demanded on the x-axis. So if we were to see, it would be this curve. Okay, and let's just make a small change here. Just give me a minute. Right. So ignore this curve. We're just dealing with this for now. Now, so this particular curve, what I called it was the consumer response curve. In reality, it is actually that. It's dealing with what the consumer actually wants when the consumer is able to demand more, right? So the first issue which comes with learning demand in normal ways is that we always say that when price is less, the consumer demands more, right? Now, that's a very different idea. When I'm saying I demand more, it means that I have the willingness and the ability to demand more, right? Price falling is fine, but price falling is a whole different ballgame. There are a lot of dynamics which you need to understand. We're not going into that. I want to tackle how would my demand increase without a fluctuation in price, right? So price is said to be a constant. The only way, literally the only way demand can increase is if my real income goes up. So we are going to deal with the idea of your real income going up and you're dealing with a commodity which you normally consume, a normal good, right? And this is what happens. It's the consumer curve because as quantity demanded goes up, that means as my real income is increasing, I have the ability to demand more. Now, ideally speaking, why should I be paying a higher price for it? Because if earlier that same Kurkure packet was what, 10 bucks, now suddenly when I am demanding more, when I want more, why is it increasing? It's simply increasing because of the idea that everything is limited. As much as technology is, as much as technology, like you can change it, you can get more and more people to do stuff, you can make more commodities, it always has a cap. That's the idea. And that's why as we start increasing the amount we consume, the producer also is literally forced to increase the price to actually try and wane out some of the demand, remove some of that demand, and obviously make the most of it. So yeah, that's why the funny thing is, let's look at it from the present scenario when the corona pandemic is going on, and we are going to target the airline sector. So, as we know, moment the lockdown, like just before the lockdown was announced, and literally everyone, including myself, was trying to get onto a plane and reach home as soon as I could. The ticket prices were skyrocketedly high. Like, wrong choice of words, but it was exorbitantly high. And that's because there was a lot of demand. That's the thing. Christmas season or any time when people would fly more, the price of those tickets are super high. When demand is more, price is high. But I think it was after the lockdown, most people had already reached where they had to, but there were these last few flights which were taking people. The pricing on those flights was actually cheaper than what it was before. When demand is low, the price is also low, right? That is the idea of how demand affects price. When demand is low, price is low because the producer doesn't want to keep the price high if demand is low. Because if the demand is low, then the producer will be like, okay, fine, why is the demand low? If the demand is low because there's another commodity which is doing better, the producer would probably jump onto that commodity and can start producing that in order to actually increase his revenue. And thus he reduces the price here. Uh, the producer's behavior and the producer's response to the consumer curve is simply based on the idea of scarcity. Like I said, when when the price of a commodity is really high, so why would the price of a commodity be super high? Now it's simply because a lot of people are demanding it and there isn't enough to sell. That is the idea of scarcity. So price is high, quantity is low. When price is low, quantity is also high, right? That's the idea of the producer's curve when we look at demand. So now let's look at the first idea which I brought out here, willingness and ability. So I'll just show you two curves. Let's just see where I can draw it. Hmm. So what I'm trying to show is willingness and ability both on a graph. So that will actually explain why is there a particular definition for something. And that's something which I understood, that if I'm actually dealing with a definition or a theory and I can chart it out, it explains it so much more better. So first we'll just draw the 101 demand curve which I had introduced, and from a consumer standpoint, and literally next to it what I'm going to draw is the producer's response curve. I brought it out in the last lecture. I just introduced the idea, but I'll just go into it further now. Okay, yeah. So as we see, yeah, got my stroke. As we see here, 101 demand curve, very simple, the classic demand curve, right? Here we are looking at the supplier or the producer's response curve, okay? And the thing here is, if you look at the axis, here the independent variable is demand, whereas here the independent variable is price. So this is price affecting quantity, this is quantity affecting price, right? Here it's the consumer's excess demand or the additional demand which he has for a particular commodity that is shooting the prices up because of scarcity. Similarly, here it is this price which actually passes on from here to here, and this shows the ability of that producer to actually, the ability of the producer to supply those goods in a sense. So, if we were to basically show these two curves here, as the price is high, the producer is not able to sell more because he doesn't have the resources to actually create more goods. So we see a downward, it's an inverse relationship. This is the ability of the market in a sense to actually meet the demand and the requirements which the consumers have. Whereas this curve is the willingness of the consumer, which is being backed by the increase in real income that is actually causing this spike to go up. And now we can understand the definition of demand. Demand is willingness backed by ability, and ability not just of the consumer to actually purchase something, it's also the ability of the market to meet that purchase. And when we understand that, we'll be like, okay, that's what demand actually means. Because if I don't have any commodity to buy in the market, then there's no point of my demand. I'd rather demand something else. So that's the first idea. And now let's look at the market demand curve. Oh, my thing got deleted. So I'll just explain market demand curve while I just make the final edits for this graph. So a market demand curve is what everyone or any person who consumes that commodity is, it's the collected demand which everyone has. Now, when I say market demand curve, I mean demand for one particular commodity and not for multiple commodities. Multiple commodities, that's a very macro topic, we'll get into it later on. So, yeah. Now, this is what I would call a market demand curve under the 101 curve formula. Now, there's only a very slight difference which I would say in this particular curve. The slight difference is there's a curvature. I could have drawn the 101 demand curve with the same curvature. It's just that it's better to explain it when the lines are straight. Here, the curve actually explains a very simple concept. So, when we look at the definition of demand, it is willingness backed by ability. Ability we explain with the idea of scarcity. Willingness we are going to explain with the idea of diminishing marginal utility. So, let's look at the idea of the chips packet because it's something we all relate to. If I have 30 packets of chips, I stop by the third packet. That's for someone like me who will eat and eat and eat. You guys will probably stop at one, I hope. But anyway, the moment I reach 3, I don't want more. Even if the market has more, I'm like, you know what, screw it, I don't want it. That's what we're seeing here. We will pay more. We will pay because the market probably is just increasing the price. We pay it, there's no problem for it. But beyond a particular point, I'm like, I don't want more. Even if you have more, I don't want, I'm going to eat something else, I'm not going to eat. Right? So that's why the curve becomes flatter. So here, if you were to look at it, probably till here is the person who's consuming one Kurkure packet and all those people. This group till, let's say here, is those group of people who will consume the second packet also. If you notice, this bend which we see here is actually the lesser number of people. So in the first section, there are so many more people who are actually consuming one packet. The second packet, the additional packet which you're consuming, the number of people are lesser. By the time we reach the third packet, it's very, very less. And that's why it's like what? It's flat here. That's the idea of a curve like that. And it stops when I draw this line. Beyond this line, there's no one who wants to have a fourth packet. It's an imaginary scenario. But this actually explains why all these curves need to stop beyond a point. Because these explain the actual psychology which goes into the consumer curve. And that's the first idea where we are looking at different stakeholders. So, same scenario in this curve. If I would say that I can consume as much as I want, we could also deal with it in that manner. So, here what's happening is, we are looking at a section of the population which has what I would say unlimited demand. Now, these group of people will consume literally anything you give them and as much as you give them. Okay? Let's get that fact there. But even there, the curve will end. The reason is very simple. So, let's say this first group of people, they can demand, they will eat, they'll be able to do whatever they want. They can eat as much, right? But after a point of time, the resources are limited. That's the idea of scarcity coming here. And when you reach here, even though you may want to eat 30 packets more, the market isn't able to supply that, right? And I am taking the consideration that technology is also changing, all of that. Still, like we explained in the last lecture when I showed the proof for it, the market also has a cap, and once we reach that cap, that's it. Now, so that was the first type of progressive demand curve I was looking at. The second progressive demand curve actually handles one of the assumptions the demand theory in itself has. So, under the demand theory, we're looking at different income groups and how they relate to demand, right? Here, on one graph, I'm showing the income different income groups demanding the same commodity per se, right? Now, there's a small caveat here. If you guys can notice it, just comment it, like just put it down in the comments. I'll explain it as I finish the curve, but it's something which is a mix of a government controlled economy and a laissez-faire economy. So let's just see that, right? So the first curve is smaller, and yeah, the slopes are probably the same. Need not be. This is more of a freehand drawing, but yeah. So the first curve, if you see, is dealing with the lower income groups. Why? The lower income groups has, at the end of the day, they have an income restriction, and beyond a point, as price goes up, they can't consume more. They'll probably consume till an extent. This price change for them will be very low. So we're probably looking at a few units of price change here, a few rupees, a few dollars, like that. So once they reach this point here, once they reach this particular point, after they don't want to consume more, even if they have the willingness to do so, because they don't have the monetary ability to actually finance that demand. The second group here is the middle income group. Now, there's a small gap here. But yeah, this line would be the same. Don't really focus on the gap. That's not the point. The point is, the middle income group can actually also consume this lower bit that is at a lower price, but I'm choosing for them not to. Why? So, if you know that all the PDS shops which are there, that's the public distribution system, ration shops, all of that, right? We can't go, a person who's a middle income group person, they can't really go and purchase from those shops until and unless they don't have a ration card. And those shops sell the commodities at the cheapest possible price. That's what this gap is. It shows till here that at this price, only the lower income group people could consume it. Once you move here, it's the middle income group people. And finally, it's the highest, the richest of the rich who are consuming. That is why the curve is also much more longer. If you see, the length of the curve increases. The length basically means they have a greater duration, time period in which they can consume, and they actually have a lesser response, their responsiveness to price is kind of lower. The first group, they're highly price sensitive. So if the price is increasing too much, they stop consuming. Second group, little more lesser, and third group, they really don't care. So here, that's why I've said there's a maximum supply capacity, right? That's a kind of special case which you're looking at here. With the maximum supply capacity, it's the higher income group which is able to consume. This is the max point, beyond which you can't consume more. So this is income in the same demand curve. And if you were to aggregate this, like you were to show it together, you'd get something like this, where it's super flat at the top and it tends to curve into it. So we here have split the three different income groups, but when you draw it as the market demand curve, you actually get this. And that's one of the biggest things I could have gained in this particular theory, that if I was able to show that income need not be an assumption and people's income can keep fluctuating, that's a huge benefit which I have. So the final idea which I want to visit, I know the lecture is slightly long, but it's fine. It's understanding these ideas will allow us to finally tackle one of the biggest challenges which demand has in the next lecture. So what we have done in this theory, using all these, the market demand, using income, all of that, we've reduced the number of assumptions which we have for this theory. From what I can see, compared to classical demand curve of Marshall, which has 5 or 6 assumptions, this particular theory has only 2 assumptions. One assumption is literally for the heck of it, rational consumer. And yeah, you have to take it as an assumption because obviously there are some people out there who, I mean, even after I made this theory, I'm hoping some of you actually go into the market and try and prove the theory wrong, because that's just funny. But yeah, that's what I mean. some people won't actually do what is the normal. They do something else because you want to break the norm, which is great. But yeah, it I have to take an assumption for it. The second thing is the effect of a similar commodity on the original commodity. That idea we're going to visit in the next lecture. It's slightly more long and I don't want to extend this video too long. So it's basically competitive, how we deal with competition in the market. Trust me, it's going to be really fun when we do it. Yeah, the last idea which I want to talk about is the technological innovation, or what I've named it as producer mobility. And starting the lesson, I'd given the example of Phineas and Ferb, Too Young, literally any sector. Um, I love airplanes, so the airline industry is dominated by two producers, Boeing and Airbus. Now, there are certain like let's see, the Airbus A340 was one aircraft which didn't really make any sense. The A340 was actually a much more expensive airplane, and hence they didn't have too many customers actually buying it, right? So Airbus realized that this was a problem. Literally after that, they brought out more and more advanced flights, more and more better aircrafts, and that is what I mean, technological innovation. What producers are doing nowadays is, if your technology is actually becoming more redundant, you use that technology to create better technology. And it doesn't take too much time. We've guys like Elon Musk out there who want to conquer space. I mean, that dude is conquering space right now. He's built a tunnel for no reason. I'm rambling, but the point is, you can do anything with the present day technology, and everything is faster, right? Um, and that's the thing, right? Like, a producer doesn't need to stick with a commodity which he feels the market won't buy. The simplest thing here is the same Kurkure example. So, Too Young, when they come out with their whole health chips, it's good. And Kurkure or any company need not have actually jumped on the bandwagon. But what they did is introduce a different commodity which taps into that particular sector of people. And it was fast. They didn't need to have years and years of research and development for it. If the market likes it, they jump on it. That is what I mean by a dynamic environment. Producer mobility is based on how fast a producer or a seller can actually jump and determine what the consumers actually like. That is why we need market research, all of that, to understand what does the consumer really want. And it adds up to the demand curve which we've introduced. The 101 demand curve is based on consumers' demand, consumers' choice. When the consumer wants something, the producer will always deliver it. And trust me, inventories are always less. As we saw, when the prices of tickets were low, sorry, when the demand was low for the tickets, the price was also low. And it's not inventories, they still ran it because they have to generate at least that minimal revenue. So, with the idea of inventories, what producers nowadays are trying to do is, if they have inventories left from a commodity which is a sunset commodity, people don't want it, they use that same commodity to actually create the new commodity, right? And that is what I mean by inventories will always be minimized when you in a dynamic environment like today. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to talk. That's the point of this whole lecture. We've explained the market demand curve, we've explained the definition of demand with the 101 demand curve. We've also seen the assumptions which we had to take. And the last idea which we brought out was producer mobility and inventory minimization. So yeah, in the next lecture, which is going to be the final lecture for the demand series, after that we'll look into supply and then we'll come to the Big Bang equilibrium. That's going to be really fun, trust me. I never realized that this sort of an equilibrium could exist. It then struck me. So yeah, the next lecture, it's going to be really short, but we're just going to talk about the last assumption which I had taken. So yeah, I'll see you in the next lecture.